Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was trained by Scarlet Witch to master chaos magic. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The silence in Izuku Midoriya's bedroom was a living thing. It was thick and suffocating, broken only by the tinny, looping audio from his computer monitor. On the screen, All Might, in all his sunbright glory, threw his head back and laughed, his voice a booming echo of a promise now broken. Yes! You too can be a hero! The words, once a holy scripture that had fueled every waking moment of Izuku's life, now landed like stones in the pit of his stomach. Each repetition was a fresh twist of the knife. It had been 3 days since the sludge villain. 3 days since All Might had saved him, and then, on a lonely rooftop, had carefully, almost kindly, dismantled his soul. It's good to have a dream, young man. Just make sure it's realistic. The room was a shrine to a dead faith. Posters of heroes in dynamic, life-saving poses seemed to mock him from the walls. His collection of premium All Might figurines, once sources of endless inspiration, now stood like rows of golden tombstones. The air was stale, heavy with the dust of shattered hope. His mother, Inko, had tried to coax him out, her worried eyes and gentle offerings of katsudon only serving to deepen his shame. He couldn't eat. The food tasted like ash, each bite a reminder of his own inadequacy. His most prized possessions, the 13 meticulously crafted volumes of his hero analysis for the future notebooks, were gone, not thrown away. He couldn't bring himself to commit such a final sacrilege, but shoved deep into the dark space beneath his bed, buried alongside his future. He had spent hours on them, his pen scratching furiously as he dissected quirks, predicted hero support item upgrades, and mapped out collaborative ultimate moves. It was the only thing he was ever good at, seeing the potential in others. He had analyzed hundreds of heroes, but he had never been able to find a single path for the one person who needed it most. Himself. He reached out a trembling hand and paused the video. All Might's face was frozen in a triumphant smile, a mask of invincible optimism. Izuku saw past it now. He'd seen the steam, the smoke, the skeletal man beneath the myth. He'd seen the truth, and the truth was that the world was not built for people like him. It wasn't just about quirks. It felt deeper, more fundamental than that. He felt a profound sense of wrongness, an itch under the skin of reality itself. The world operated on a set of rules, a rigid syntax of cause and effect, of power and powerlessness. And he was a typo, a grammatical error in a universe that had no room for corrections. He was quirkless, a broken sentence. The world was telling him, in no uncertain terms, that he did not belong in the story he so desperately wanted to be a part of. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping against the floor with a sound that felt far too loud in the oppressive quiet. He walked to his window, looking out over the evening skyline of Muzurifu. The city lights blinked into existence, a sprawling constellation of human achievement. Out there, heroes were patrolling. People were being saved. The world was moving on, a grand narrative continuing without him. He was just an observer, a footnote. A single, wilting succulent sat on his windowsill. He'd forgotten to water it for the past few days, too consumed by his own withering spirit. One of its fleshy leaves had turned a sickly yellow-brown and was shriveling at the edges. He touched it gently. It felt limp and fragile. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the plant, the first words he'd spoken all day. His voice was a dry rasp. "I can't even help you." A wave of exhaustion, so profound it was almost a physical blow, crashed over him. It wasn't just the lack of sleep or food. It was a soul-deep weariness, the fatigue of fighting a battle he was never equipped to win. He stumbled to his bed, not bothering to change out of his school uniform, and collapsed onto the mattress. He didn't pull the covers over himself. He just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the cold seep into his bones as the last vestiges of daylight died outside his window. Sleep, when it finally came, was not a gentle drift, but a black, sudden drop into an abyss. And then, there was static. It wasn't a dream, not in the way he understood them. There were no disjointed narratives or familiar faces. There was only the void. It was a place of deep, pressurized silence, a blackness so absolute it felt like a weight against his eyelids. He had no body, no form. He was just a point of awareness, a disembodied consciousness floating in an endless sea of nothing. Slowly, a sound began to bleed into the silence. It was a low hiss, like a radio tuned between stations, the sound of cosmic background radiation given voice. With the sound came a color. Red, not a bright, vibrant crimson, but a deep, bruised scarlet, the color of a dying ember or a sealed wound. It manifested as flickering motes of light, dancing in the void like dust in a sunbeam. The red static crackled and popped around him, a field of unpredictable energy. It didn't feel threatening. It felt ancient, primordial. He tried to call out, but he had no mouth. He tried to move, but he had no limbs. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the edges of his awareness. Was this death? Was this what came after? Then a voice. It wasn't a sound that entered his ears. It was a presence that bloomed directly in the center of his mind. It was female, calm and melodic, yet woven through with a thread of profound, bottomless melancholy. It was the sound of a symphony played on a single, sorrowful cello string. A question, not spoken but impressed upon his very being. A feeling of gentle inquiry, like a soft hand tilting his chin up. Who are you, little light? So lost in the dark? The question echoed in the non-space he occupied. He tried to answer, to form his name, Izuku Midoriya, but the concepts felt clumsy and alien here. This place, this voice, it dealt in purer things. Feelings, intentions. He projected the feeling of his own identity, a sense of smallness, of being overlooked, of a burning, desperate yearning. The voice seemed to understand. The static around him swirled, the red motes gathering into soft, flowing patterns. I heard you. A cry across the static. A scream that dented reality. A wish so pure, so powerful, it tore a hole through the veil between worlds. A hole between worlds? Izuku's consciousness reeled. This was impossible. This had to be a dream, a fever dream brought on by grief and starvation. Dreams are the echoes of reality, the voice responded, as if hearing his thoughts. This is something else. This is the place between the pages. The engine room of what is, what was, and what could be. Visions flickered within the red static, projections of his own memories played back for him. He saw a small, green-haired boy with tears in his eyes, pointing at a computer screen and asking his mother if he could be a hero, too. He saw himself being shoved by Bakugo, the sting of the explosive quirk on his skin, the smell of burnt sugar. He saw the suffocating, viscous grip of the sludge villain. And then, he saw the rooftop. All Might, gaunt and shadowed, his words carving canyons of despair into Izuku's heart. The voice was soft, laced with an empathy that felt achingly real. He told you that you could not change the world. That the rules are absolute. Izuku's despair, which had been a dull, constant ache for days, flared into a hot, vibrant agony. It was the raw, screaming injustice of it all. The unfairness. But you do not believe him, do you? The voice continued, its tone shifting, becoming more focused, more intense. Deep down, beneath the pain and the doubt you feel it. The wrongness. The sense that the story is written in chalk, not ink. You do not wish to simply be a character in the story. You want to be the author. The voice was putting words, or rather concepts, to the formless feelings that had haunted him his entire life. The desire not just to participate, but to fix. To edit. To rewrite. So, I will ask you again, child of broken rules. Tell me. What is it that you want more than anything in the world? The question hung in the void, shimmering with power. This was not a casual inquiry. It felt like a vow, a magical incantation waiting for its final, activating word. It demanded the absolute, undiluted truth. Izuku's consciousness gathered itself. All the pain, all the years of being called useless, all the frustration, all the hopeless, burning desire, it coalesced into a single, titanic point of will. He didn't just think the answer. He became it. He poured every fiber of his being into the response, screaming it into the static-filled void with the force of a supernova. To help people. To change things. The void shuddered. The red static, which had been drifting placidly, erupted. It surged towards him, a roaring tidal wave of scarlet energy, but instead of destroying him, it flowed around and through him, a current of impossible power that did not burn. It felt like coming home. The hissing sound rose to a triumphant chorus, and the red light blazed, banishing the blackness. For the first time in this place, he could see himself. He had a form, a body made of the same shimmering red energy. He looked down and saw hands, glowing with contained starlight. The static was no longer around him, it was him. The voice was back, closer now, filled with a resonant, awestruck hum. Extraordinary. So much will. So much raw, untamed potential. I have not felt its like in an age. What is this? Izuku projected, his ethereal hands clenched into fists. Is this a quirk? Did I have a quirk all along? No. The voice was firm, unequivocal. A quirk is a single, powerful word spoken by your world's genetics. A biological footnote. This is the language the universe is written in. It is the grammar of reality. Some on my world called it witchcraft. But its true name is older. More honest. The red energy around his hands swirled faster, coalescing into a sphere of liquid light. It is chaos magic. The word settled over Izuku, heavy with significance. Chaos magic. The name itself felt both terrifying and intoxicating. It is the power to tell reality a new story, the voice explained, a patient tutor. To bend the probabilities. To convince an object that it was always meant to be somewhere else. To whisper a suggestion into the ear of physics and have it obey. It is not a power you have. It is a fundamental truth you are connected to. You are not broken, Izuku Midoriya. You are simply written in a language no one else on your world can read. The validation in those words was more powerful than anything All Might could have ever said. Not broken. A different language. He wasn't a typo. He was a foreign phrase, beautiful and misunderstood. Tears, made of red energy, streamed from his spectral eyes. But it is a dangerous language, the voice warned, its melancholic tone returning. It is fueled by will, shaped by emotion. A heart full of grief can create a prison of sadness. A mind lost to rage can burn worlds. Power like this requires a vessel of immense strength and impeccable character. That is why I was drawn to you. I see no malice in your heart. Only a desperate, beautiful desire to mend what is broken. Izuku looked at his glowing hands, at the impossible power cradled within them. A lifetime of powerlessness warred with this sudden, terrifying revelation. Who are you? He asked, the question finally forming. Why are you helping me? There was a long pause. The static hissed softly. When the voice returned, it was heavy with a sorrow that felt ancient and vast. I am a warning. A cautionary tale. I am one who let her grief write a tragedy, and I am spending my eternity trying to ensure no one else makes the same mistake. I am a Scarlet Witch, and I will be your teacher, if you will have me. Scarlet Witch. The name meant nothing to him, but he could feel the weight of it, the history of pain and power it carried. A teacher? Him? A quirkless, useless Deku? It was too much to comprehend. Let us start small, Wanda's voice said gently, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts. The greatest spells are built on the simplest truths. You must learn to crawl before you can fly. You must learn to convince reality, not command it. The scene in the void shifted. The swirling red energy around them thinned, and an image began to form, like a photograph developing in a dark room. It was his bedroom. He saw it from the perspective of where he lay on his bed, the moonlight striping the floor, the All Might poster standing in silent judgment. And on the windowsill, bathed in a pale, lunar glow, was the wilting succulent. The vision was so clear he could see the brown, shriveled edge of the dying leaf. Look at it, Wanda instructed. This is your first lesson. Your world says this plant is dying. Its biology, the lack of water, the passage of time, it all points to an inevitable conclusion. The rules are written. But you can offer an edit. Izuku stared at the image of the plant. He felt a surge of the same helplessness he'd felt when he was awake. But how? What do I do? Do not wish it were healthy, Wanda's voice guided, her mental tone becoming sharp, focused. Wishing is passive. It is a request made to a deaf universe. You are no longer requesting. You are stating, do not try to heal it. Know that it is already healed. See the reality where it is vibrant and thriving, a reality that runs parallel to this one. See it in your mind clear as day. Then, with all of your will, with that same fire you screamed with moments ago, pull that reality into this one. Make it the truth. He closed his spectral eyes. He focused. He pictured the succulent not as it was, but as it should be. He envisioned water seeping into its roots, the life-giving energy flowing up its stem. He saw the sickly yellow leaf turning a healthy, vibrant green. He imagined a new bud, a new leaf, pushing its way into existence. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. His mind, so used to analyzing the concrete and the real, rebelled against the task. It felt like trying to solve an impossible physics problem, but Wanda's voice was a steady presence, an anchor in the storm of his doubt. More Izuku. Do not just see it. Believe it. It is not a lie. It is an alternative fact of existence, and you are the arbiter. Your will is the bridge between what is and what could be. Hold the image. Make it solid. He pushed harder, pouring his focus into the mental image of the healthy plant. A headache began to throb behind his eyes, even in this formless state. He felt a strain, as if a muscle he never knew he had was being flexed for the first time. He gritted his teeth, a bead of ethereal sweat trickling down his temple. He felt a shift. A subtle give in the fabric of the universe, like a stubborn knot finally loosening. A faint, red glow began to emanate from his dream body, a soft light that pulsed in time with his frantic heartbeat. The light was thin, tenuous, but it was there. It was his. That's it, Wanda whispered, her voice filled with encouragement. Hold it. Now let go. The vision of his room shattered. The red energy receded. The void, the static, and the voice dissolved like smoke in the wind. Izuku's eyes snapped open. He was in his bed, tangled in his sheets. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic, wild rhythm. His forehead was slick with real, cold sweat, and his body trembled with a strange, thrumming exhaustion. The dream. It had felt more real than reality. The red static still seemed to dance in the corners of his vision. He sat up, his breath catching in his throat. It was just a dream. A bizarre, vivid, emotionally charged dream, but a dream nonetheless. His mind, desperate for an escape, had simply fabricated one. It was the only logical explanation. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, the cool wood of the floor a grounding sensation beneath his feet. The moonlight was just as he'd seen it in his vision. His gaze was drawn, as if by a magnetic force, to the windowsill. He held his breath. There, in its small clay pot, sat the succulent. He took a hesitant step forward, then another. His scientific mind was already listing a dozen rationalizations. The moonlight was playing tricks on his eyes. He was projecting what he wanted to see. His memory of the plant's state was flawed. He reached the window and leaned in close, his nose almost touching the cool glass. He stared at the plant, his eyes tracing every line, every curve. Most of it was the same. The soil was still dry. The other leaves were still a bit dull. The one shriveled, yellowing leaf was still there, a testament to his neglect. But next to it, sprouting from the very same junction on the stem, was something new. It was a leaf. A tiny, perfect, jewel-green leaf, no bigger than his thumbnail. It was vibrant, plump, and firm, glistening with a single, perfect drop of dew that wasn't present anywhere else in the room. It was a beacon of impossible life, a splash of brilliant color against the canvas of decay. It hadn't been there yesterday. He was certain. He had stared at that plant for a long time, seeing his own despair reflected in its wilting form. He would have noticed. He reached out a trembling finger and gently, so gently, touched the new leaf. It was real. It was solid. Cool and alive beneath his skin. Impossible. It violated every law of biology he knew. A plant in that state couldn't sprout a new, perfectly healthy leaf overnight without water, without sunlight, without any change in its conditions. It was a biological contradiction. A grammatical error. You are not broken. You are simply written in a language no one else on your world can read. The voice from the dream echoed in his mind clear as a bell. He stumbled back from the window, his hand flying to his mouth to stifle a gasp. He looked at his own hands, half expecting to see them glowing with red light. They were just his hands, pale, a little calloused, with scarred knuckles from a childhood of scraped knees and misplaced courage. There was nothing special about them, and yet, the proof sat on his windowsill, a silent, green testament to a power that defied all logic. The despair that had been his constant companion for 3 days, the heavy, leaden blanket that had smothered his spirit, was not gone. But it had changed. It was now shot through with a terrifying, brilliant, and utterly new feeling. It was not the blind optimism he once had in heroes. It was not the borrowed hope he took from All Might's smile. This was something else. It was the thrill of a scientist discovering a new fundamental force of nature. It was the terror of a child who had just found a loaded gun. It was the first, tentative spark of something he had never truly had before. It was power. His power. He looked from his hands to the plant, and back again. The silence in his room was no longer suffocating. It was humming with potential, with a whisper of static just beyond the veil of his hearing. His dream wasn't over. It was just beginning. The question that had been buried under a mountain of grief clawed its way to the surface, insistent and bright. The question that would define the rest of his life. What was that? The world had split in two. There was the waking world, a place of hard edges, fixed rules, and the lingering sting of the word quirkless. It was a world of grueling physical labor under a hazy sun, of the acrid smell of rusted metal at the Dagoba Municipal Beach, and of his mother's worried, loving glances over dinner. It was the world where he was still Izuku Midoriya, the boy with a dream too big for his body. Then, there was the other world. The real world, as a terrifying and exhilarating part of his mind was beginning to believe. This world waited for him in the quiet moments just before sleep, a hum of scarlet static at the edge of his perception. For the first few weeks after that initial, reality-altering dream, his visits were accidental. He would fall into an exhausted sleep and find himself adrift in the crimson void, the voice of the woman who called herself Wanda a distant, guiding echo. But Izuku, a being of analysis and relentless determination, could not leave such a profound phenomenon to chance. He began to experiment. He realized the transition was smoother when his mind was calm, focused. It wasn't about sleeping. It was about letting go of the physical world's rigid grammar and opening himself to another. Now, 10 months before the most important exam of his life, it had become a ritual. Each night, after a day of hauling scrap metal and a dinner he now ate with a healthy appetite, he would sit on his bed, cross his legs, and close his eyes. He would breathe, focusing on the space between the inhale and the exhale. He'd push away the anxieties of the day, Bakugo's sneering face, the daunting scale of the UA entrance exam, the weight of All Might's secret, and reach for the hum. And it would answer. The feeling was like dipping his head beneath the surface of a still pond. The sounds of his world would mute, replaced by a low, pervasive hiss. Darkness would envelop him, and then, like stars igniting in a newborn cosmos, the red motes of light would flicker into existence. He was no longer in his bedroom. He was in the nexus of wills. Wanda was always there to greet him. She was never a full, solid person, but an ethereal silhouette woven from the densest threads of the scarlet static, a humanoid shape of deeper red against the swirling backdrop. She had no face, yet he could feel her smile. She had no voice, yet her words bloomed in his mind with perfect clarity, and a lingering sadness that never quite faded. "You are getting faster," her thought voice chimed as his own energy form coalesced. "Your will has found the path. It feels familiar now." Izuku projected back, flexing the fingers of his glowing red hand. "Like coming home. This place is the home of all potential," Wanda explained, her form drifting closer. "It is the chaotic space where all realities are born, a nexus, where the force of a single, powerful will can intersect with the flow of existence and create change. Most beings are deaf to its call. You, Izuku, hear its symphony." His training began in earnest. The 10 months he had given himself to prepare his body for a quirk he might never receive became a crucible for a power he could barely comprehend. While his days were spent in grueling physical conditioning, hauling refrigerators and engine blocks to strengthen his body, his nights were spent in the Nexus, learning to rewrite the laws that govern them. His first true lesson was in the art of subtlety. Chaos magic is not a hammer, Izuku, Wanda instructed one night, her form circling his. Threads of light followed in her wake, like a celestial gown. Not at first. It is a whisper. Reality is a grand tapestry, woven from trillions upon trillions of threads of probability. Every action, every decision, every random quark spin, is a thread. A quirk is a cudgel that tears a hole in the fabric. We are weavers. We learn to gently pull on the threads that already exist. She showed him an image, a memory plucked from his own mind. It was from middle school, one of Bakugo's two main cronies, the one with the extendable fingers, cornering him in the hallway. In the memory, the bully had shoved him, sending his books scattering. See him? Wanda's voice was soft. His arrogance is a thread. The worn laces on his shoes are another. The slickness of the polished floor is a third. See how they intersect? Izuku focused. In the nexus, he could perceive the world differently. He saw the bully, but also a shimmering web of faint red lines connected to him, lines of possibility. One line led to him tripping, another to a teacher rounding the corner, another to him simply walking away. The most dominant, thickest thread was the one where he shoved Izuku. A hex is not a curse, Wanda explained. It is a suggestion. A nudge. You are not creating bad luck, you are simply making the existing possibility of it more probable. Find the thread of his shoelaces, and tug. Izuku took a deep breath, the non-air of the nexus filling his non-lungs. He focused on the memory, on the image of the worn, loosely tied laces. He reached out with his will, a tendril of his consciousness, and found the corresponding thread in the web of probability. It felt slippery, tenuous. He focused his intent, trip, stumble, lose your balance, and pulled. In the vision, the bully took a swaggering step forward, and his foot snagged. He went down in a clatter of flailing limbs and surprised curses. The memory Izuku just stared, bewildered. The vision faded. Izuku was breathing heavily, the effort more mentally taxing than lifting a washing machine. Good, Wanda praised. The intent was clear. The touch was light. That is the key. Reality will fight you if you try to force it. But it can be persuaded. He began to practice in the waking world. It was his secret rebellion, small acts of defiance against the universe that had told him he was powerless. Walking to school one morning, he saw the same bully from the memory taunting a younger student. Izuku, hiding behind a corner, narrowed his eyes. He took a breath, found the threads, the uneven crack in the pavement, the bully's overconfident posture, and tugged. The bully's ankle twisted, and he yelped, hopping away in pain, his prey forgotten. A jolt of fierce, triumphant satisfaction shot through Izuku, followed immediately by a pang of guilt. He hadn't hurt him badly, just nudged karma. He grew bolder. The vending machine at his school that always ate his money? He stood before it, concentrating, and gently tugged on the probability thread of the machine's internal mechanics. He put in his coins, pressed the button, and watched in amazement as 2 cans of juice clattered into the dispenser. Driving with his mother, he would focus on the traffic lights ahead. He learned to feel the rhythm of the city, the flow of probability. He couldn't turn a red light green, that was too forceful, a direct contradiction of the established reality. But he could influence the timing. He could tug on the threads of the cross traffic, making it a tiny bit sparser, encouraging the system to switch a moment earlier. They started hitting every green light. His mother called it their lucky streak. Izuku just smiled, the secret buzzing like a current under his skin. His notebooks, once filled with hero analysis, now had a new, secret companion. Tucked under his mattress was a fresh notebook, identical to the others, but its title, written in careful, hesitant script, was different, Analysis for a New Reality. Its pages were filled not with drawings of heroes, but with abstract diagrams of intersecting lines and theoretical equations that had no basis in known physics. Entry 7, Probability Hexes, Minor, Hypothesis. The effectiveness of a hex is directly proportional to the pre-existing probability of the event and the clarity of the user's intent. It is easier to make a clumsy person trip, high probability, than to make a meteor strike, infinitesimally low probability. Energy cost seems minimal. More of a mental focus drain than a physical energy expenditure. After nudging the traffic lights for 10 minutes, I felt a slight headache, similar to studying for too long. No physical fatigue. Observations. The effect is almost untraceable. There is no visible energy signature. The world simply complies. It seems the most efficient application of chaos magic is to create outcomes that could have happened anyway. The world doesn't notice a subtle edit, only a major rewrite. This could be incredibly useful for stealth and rescue operations, influencing a villain's weapon to jam, for instance, or a support structure to hold for a few seconds longer. Wanda's note. A gentle touch can fell a mountain if applied to the right pebble. Must investigate this further. What is the right pebble for stopping a major villain? This analytical approach was the only way Izuku knew how to process the impossible. He was mapping the coastline of a new continent, and it was both terrifying and the most exciting thing he had ever done. As the months wore on, and his body grew harder and stronger from the physical labor at Dagoba Beach, Wanda moved him on to the second, more tangible lesson: telekinesis. The sun was setting over the heaps of trash, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Izuku stood before a mountain of scrap, his muscles aching, his body slick with sweat. He had spent 8 hours hauling garbage by hand. Now, his real work began. You've been trying to lift the objects. Wanda's voice echoed in his mind. She could connect with him now, even when he was awake, though it was a faint whisper compared to the clarity of the Nexus. You are thinking like a crane. Like a strength quirk. That is wrong. You are not applying force. It feels like I am. Izuku grunted, staring at a rusted, discarded microwave. He had been trying to move it for 10 minutes, and it had only wobbled. Forget everything you know about physics, Wanda's mental voice instructed. That microwave has a place in reality. Right now, its place is there. You must simply impose your will. You must convince reality, with every fiber of your being, that it's true, its only proper place is 10 feet to the left. Her next words resonated deep in his soul, a foundational truth of his new existence. The spoon does not bend, Izuku. You simply convince reality that it was always meant to be bent. Izuku closed his eyes. He let go of the concepts of mass, gravity, and friction. He looked at the microwave, not as an object to be lifted, but as a statement in the language of reality, and he was going to edit it. He imagined the microwave 10 feet to the left. He pictured the empty space it currently occupied, the patch of sand it would soon rest upon. This wasn't a wish. It was a correction. A statement of fact. Your place is over there. A faint, ruby-red aura, barely visible in the twilight, shimmered around the microwave. It trembled, then slid sideways through the air, completely silent, kicking up no sand. It wasn't floating. It was as if the space it occupied was moving. It settled gently onto its new spot with a soft thump. Izuku's eyes widened. A grin, the first truly joyful grin he'd had in months, split his face. I did it. You did, Wanda affirmed. Now do it again. With the refrigerator, the beach became his dojo. His task of cleaning the entire coastline before the exams, once an impossible Herculean labor, was now his training ground. He would spend the daylight hours doing it the hard way, building his physical strength, conditioning the vessel. But in the evenings, as the world grew quiet, he practiced the impossible. He started small, with microwaves and car batteries. Then he moved on to tires and washing machines. Soon, he was able to move entire refrigerators, the red energy surrounding them crackling audibly, a sound like rustling leaves and breaking twigs. He learned to levitate a dozen pieces of scrap at once, a swirling constellation of junk orbiting him as he sorted it into piles. The red glow became his constant companion, a secret halo of power. By the 8th month, he was lifting entire car chassis, the metal groaning under the strain as he gently lowered them onto a massive pile. He looked less like a boy cleaning a beach and more like a scrapyard god, sculpting a new landscape from the forgotten refuse of society. His body was lean and corded with muscle, a stark contrast to the scrawny, hunched frame he'd had before. But the true change was in his eyes. The haunted, desperate look was gone, replaced by a deep, focused intensity. The confidence of someone who knew, unequivocally, that he was not powerless. But with great confidence came great risk. It happened during the 9th month. The beach was nearly clear, a testament to his inhuman efforts. Only one section remained, dominated by a colossal, compacted tangle of buses and trucks, a metal leviathan half buried in the sand. He had been picking at its edges for weeks, but the core of it was too massive, too intertwined. He stood before it one evening, frustration coiling in his gut. He was running out of time. The UE exam was just over a month away. He needed to finish this. He reached out with his will, targeting a rusted-out bus frame embedded deep in the pile. He pulled, trying to convince it to move. It didn't budge. The sheer, unyielding mass of it resisted his will. "It's too heavy," he grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. The red energy around the bus flared, causing the metal to hum. "Its place is over here," he screamed in his mind, pouring more and more of his will into the effort. "Move!" Frustration, hot and sharp, surged through him. He was sick of being weak. He was sick of limitations. He had the power of creation at his fingertips, and he was being defied by a pile of junk. The red energy around the bus frame deepened from ruby to a dark, angry crimson. Instead of lifting, the metal began to warp. The frame twisted in on itself with a horrific shriek of tortured steel, denting and buckling as if squeezed by an invisible giant. The magic, fueled by his anger, had turned violent. Suddenly, a wave of icy cold washed over his mind, cutting through his rage. Wanda's voice, no longer a gentle guide but a thunderclap of command. "Enough!" Izuku gasped, stumbling back. The red energy vanished. The screeching of metal stopped. He was left panting, staring at the damage he had wrought. The bus frame was mangled, a twisted ruin. He hadn't moved it. He had brutalized it. That night, the nexus of wills was different. The red static was agitated, swirling in violent, chaotic patterns. Wanda's silhouette was sharp, her usual calm aura replaced with a stern, imposing gravity. "What you felt tonight, that flash of anger, that is the danger," she stated, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "Chaos magic is not a tool, Izuku. It is a part of you. It is connected directly to your heart, your emotions. When you feel joy, it sings. When you are calm, it is precise. But when you feel anger or fear or grief, it becomes a weapon of terrible, indiscriminate destruction." Izuku's form trembled. I'm sorry. I lost control." "You must never lose control," she insisted. "The consequences are unthinkable. I am not teaching you this power so you can become another monster who bends the world to his whims." Her silhouette flickered, and the nexus around them shifted. Izuku was no longer in the void. He was standing on a paved street in a picturesque, sun-drenched suburban town. It looked American, like something from an old movie. Families were having picnics. Children were riding bicycles. But something was wrong. The movements were jerky, repetitive. A mailman walked by, tipped his hat, and said, "Howdy, neighbor." Ben took 3 steps, glitched back to his original spot, and repeated the gesture and the words. "Howdy, neighbor." "Wanda, what is this place?" Izuku asked, a sense of deep unease crawling up his spine. "This was my prison," Wanda's voice whispered, filled with a self-loathing so profound it made him ache. "And I was its warden." The scene flickered. He saw a pristine white picket fence suddenly bloom with rust and decay. He saw the face of a woman, her eyes wide with terror, as she was violently ejected through a shimmering red wall of energy. He saw a living room, cozy and warm, where a man made of wires and metal began to disintegrate, his last words a choked. "Wanda." Then, the most haunting image of all. He stood in a child's bedroom. 2 small beds were perfectly made. Toys were neatly arranged. The room was filled with the lingering feeling of laughter and love, but it was utterly, devastatingly empty. The silence in that room was the loudest thing Izuku had ever heard. "I was drowning in my grief," Wanda's voice narrated, thick with unshed tears. "So I built myself a world where it didn't exist. I rewrote the lives of an entire town of innocent people, trapping them in a story I created to soothe my own pain. They were my puppets. Their minds, their wills, their loves, all of it was secondary to my need to not be alone. This, Izuku, is what happens when grief is given unlimited power. This is the sin that chaos magic enables. The vision dissolved, and they were back in the swirling nexus. Izuku was shaking, horrified and heartbroken for this woman he had never truly met. He finally understood the deep, abiding sadness in her voice. It was the sorrow of someone who had committed an unforgivable act. The heart that powers this magic is a human one, Wanda said, her form seeming to shrink, becoming fragile. And human hearts break. All of your training, your analysis, your discipline, it is all meaningless if you cannot master your own heart. Before you are a hero, before you are a sorcerer, you must be a good man. Your compassion is your greatest shield. Do not ever let it fail you. Izuku stared at his glowing hands, no longer seeing them as instruments of hope, but as potential weapons of mass sorrow. The confidence he had built over the past few months was still there, but it was now tempered by a new, heavy companion, a cold, healthy seed of fear. Fear not of his enemies, but of himself. He returned to the waking world with a shudder. The moon was high in the sky, casting long shadows over the nearly cleared beach. He looked at the mangled bus, a monument to his momentary loss of control. He had a power that could, as Wanda had warned, burn worlds. And he was just a 15-year-old boy. He walked over to his backpack and pulled out his newest notebook, Analysis for a New Reality. He flipped to a blank page. For a moment, he just sat there, the pen hovering over the paper. Then, with a new and solemn purpose, he began to write. Entry 24, Emotional Influence and Control Protocols. Observation: negative emotional states, frustration, anger, have a quantifiable and dangerous effect on magical output. The magic becomes less precise and more destructive. The intent shifts from move to destroy. This represents the single greatest threat of this power, the user. Protocol Wanda's warning: in any situation involving heightened negative emotion, all magical use is to be suspended immediately. Priority 1 is de-escalation of the emotional state through controlled breathing and mental focus exercises. Power is secondary to control. Protocol Westview: before any large-scale use of magic, especially that which may affect other people, I must ask myself 3 questions. 1. Is this action for their benefit or my own? 2. What are the potential unseen consequences? 3. Is there a non-magical solution? The answer must be satisfactory before proceeding. He closed the notebook, the weight of his own self-imposed rules settling onto his shoulders. This wasn't a game. It wasn't just a way for him to become a hero. It was a lifelong responsibility. As the first hints of dawn painted the horizon, Izuku stood before the final, massive pile of scrap. He took a deep, calming breath, centering himself, feeling the cool morning air. He thought of Wanda's warning, of the empty children's bedroom. He thought of his own dream, not just to win, but to save. He raised his hands. A calm, steady, ruby-red light bloomed in the twilight. It enveloped the entire mountain of junk. There was no strain, no flash of anger. Just a quiet, absolute certainty. He found the right pebble. He lifted. The entire metal leviathan rose silently into the air, freed from the sand that had held it captive for years. It hovered there for a moment, a dark monolith against the rising sun, held aloft by the will of a single boy. With a steady hand, Izuku guided it to the designated disposal area and lowered it gently to the ground. The beach was clean. He stood there, watching the sunrise over the waves, the clean sand stretching out before him. He had done it. But the triumph he felt was quiet, sober. He had prepared his body. He had honed his power. But more importantly, he had learned the most critical lesson of all. The language of reality was spoken not just with will, but with wisdom. And he had a lifetime of studying ahead of him. The final piece was a monument to neglect. It was the skeletal remains of a city bus, half swallowed by the sand, its windows long gone, its frame a lacework of rust. For 10 months, it had been the silent, brooding king of this metallic wasteland. Now, it was the last subject in Izuku's conquered kingdom. The sun was a shy, pink promise on the horizon, painting the underbellies of the clouds. A cool, salt-laced wind whipped his hair across his face. He stood before the bus, his feet planted firmly in the clean, reclaimed sand. This was not the same boy who had stood here 10 months ago, scrawny and trembling with hopeless determination. His body was a taut map of new muscle, hard-won through sweat and labor. His spirit, once a flickering candle, now burned with the steady, controlled flame of a forge. He took a deep, centering breath, following the protocol he had written for himself. He pushed away the anxieties, the looming exam, the weight of his secrets. He reached for the quiet hum of the universe. The language he now knew was his mother tongue. Is this for their benefit or my own? Both. The beach needed to be clean for the community, a promise he'd made to a hero, and he needed this final act to prove to himself that he could command this power without succumbing to the emotional torrents it rode upon. What are the potential unseen consequences? The object's mass was immense. A loss of control could send it crashing into the nearby retaining wall, or worse, out toward the road. Control had to be absolute. Is there a non-magical solution? Not in the time he had left. Not for him alone. Satisfied, he raised his hands. The air around him grew thick, humming with a low thrum of energy. A soft, ruby-red light bloomed from his palms, spreading like ink in water to envelop the entire bus. There was no rage, no frustration fueling it. Only calm, focused intent. He was not commanding the bus to move. He was informing reality of a correction that needed to be made. Its place is not here. With a deep, resonant groan of protesting metal, the bus began to rise. Sand cascaded from its undercarriage as it lifted free from the grave it had occupied for years. It rose 10, then 20 feet into the air, a dark silhouette against the blushing dawn. He felt the strain, not in his muscles, but as a deep, resonant pressure in his mind, the mental equivalent of lifting a colossal weight. He held it, his jaw tight with concentration, sweat beading on his brow. He guided it slowly, carefully, across the expanse of the beach and lowered it onto the enormous pile of scrap he had accumulated, the final piece of his 10-month puzzle. As its weight settled with a final, booming clang, the red energy dissipated. Izuku dropped his hands, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had done it. He had moved a mountain of forgotten things, one piece at a time. The beach, his beach, was clean. A wave of profound, bone-deep satisfaction washed over him. He looked out at the sunrise, at the waves gently lapping against the shore, and for the first time, the future didn't feel like a locked door. It felt like an open horizon. Astounding. The voice, deep and ragged, made Izuku jolt as if struck by lightning. He spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to summon the red energy again, to form a shield, but he clamped down on it, forcing himself into a non-threatening posture. Leaning against the sea wall, shrouded in the morning shadows, was a man. He was skeletal, a scarecrow figure with clothes that hung loosely on his emaciated frame. His blonde hair fell in two dramatic bangs around a face that was all sharp angles and sunken cheeks. But it was his eyes that held Izuku captive. They were black pits in his skull, yet within them burned a fire of shocking intensity, a blue flame of indomitable will. Izuku knew that face. He had seen it for a fleeting, terrifying moment in a cloud of steam on a rooftop. All Might? He stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The man winced, a flicker of pain crossing his features. He pushed himself off the wall and took a slow, deliberate step forward, the movement seeming to cause him great effort. In a manner of speaking, Toshinori Yagi rasped. He gestured vaguely at the clean beach, a sweep of a bony hand that encompassed the Herculean scale of Izuku's labor. I came here this morning to check on your progress. I've been watching from a distance. I saw what you just did, young man. I saw you lift that bus. Izuku's blood ran cold. He had been so careful. So meticulous. He practiced in the twilight hours, always checking to make sure he was alone. To be seen, and by all might of all people. I don't know what you mean, he said, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. There are still some construction cranes that operate around here early in the morning. Maybe that's what you saw. All Might's gaze sharpened. The fire in his eyes intensified, burning away any pretense. There were no cranes, young Midoriya. No wires. No noise. Just you, and a red light, and a bus that decided to fly. I have seen thousands of quirks in my lifetime. I have never seen anything like that. Izuku's mind raced, cycling through a dozen different half-truths and deflections. But looking into the hero's eyes, the eyes of the man who had both crushed his dream and inspired his entire life, he found he couldn't formulate a convincing lie. He settled for a guarded, stony silence. Toshinori sighed, a rattling sound from deep in his chest. I am not here to accuse you. I am here because what I have witnessed has forced me to reconsider. He took another step closer. I told you on that rooftop that you couldn't be a hero without a quirk. I said it to protect you, but watching you these past months, witnessing your insane, impossible dedication, and now this. He shook his head, a look of profound wonder on his face. You did not just prove me wrong, you proved my entire worldview wrong. He stopped a few feet from Izuku and suddenly, a cloud of steam erupted from his body. Izuku flinched back, but when the steam cleared, the number one hero stood there in all his glory. All Might. His smile was as bright as the rising sun, but his eyes, the same blue fire from the skeletal man, were fixed on Izuku with an unnerving seriousness. I have come to correct a mistake, he boomed, his voice the sound of hope itself. Young man, I have been searching for a successor. And I believe you are worthy of inheriting my power. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The sound of the waves, the cry of the gulls, the wind, it all faded into a dull roar in Izuku's ears. Inherit his power? Successor? The words were from a storybook, a myth. They didn't belong here, in reality, spoken to him. Inherit your power? Izuku echoed, his voice trembling. All Might's smile didn't falter, but a trickle of blood ran from the corner of his mouth. Tell me, young man. Do you know why they call me the symbol of peace? It is not just my strength. It is because I am the holder of a sacred torch, a power passed down from one generation to the next, growing stronger with each passing. It is a quirk that can be given to another. He then told him the story. A story of a quirk born in the dark dawn of the superpowered age, of a selfless man trying to bring order to the chaos. He told him of its name, a name that was both a promise and a burden, one for all. And he told him of its nemesis, a shadowy king of crime who could steal quirks for himself, a man named All for One. As he spoke, he deflated back into his skeletal form, revealing the gruesome, starburst-shaped wound on his side, a wound that was a permanent, ugly reminder of his battle with that ancient evil. This power, this legacy, it chose you. Toshinori finished, his voice a weary rasp again. When you, quirkless and terrified, ran into a battle that seasoned heroes were avoiding, I saw the spirit of a true hero. I was moved. But I was still bound by the logic of my world. Your work here, this impossible feat, has shattered that logic. Whatever that power is that you hold, that strange red light, it is proof that you are extraordinary. And one for all needs an extraordinary vessel. Izuku stared at him, his mind a maelstrom of conflicting thoughts. This was it. The dream. The ultimate validation. The chance to have a real, tangible, heroic quirk. The power of All Might himself, laid at his feet like a divine offering. The boy he was 10 months ago would have dissolved into a puddle of grateful tears, accepting without a moment's hesitation. But he was not that boy anymore. He had a power. A terrifying, secret, primordial power. A power Wanda had called the mother tongue of creation. He had spent months learning its grammar, terrified of its potential for destruction, awed by its limitless possibilities. It was his, and now he was being offered another. Why? Izuku asked, the question sharp and sudden. Why would you give a power like that to someone who already has one? He gestured vaguely, not wanting to name what he could do. Toshinori's expression was grim. Because I am running out of time. The embers of one for all within me are fading. The world needs a new symbol of peace, and it needs one soon. And as for your quirk, I don't understand it. But I understand your heart. That is what matters. One for all is not just power, it is the crystallized will of all its previous users to save people. Your heart, young Midoriya, is already in tune with that will. You are the perfect candidate. He gave Izuku his phone number, a flimsy piece of paper that felt heavier than a block of concrete. Go home. Think about it. We will meet here again tomorrow morning, at sunrise. Give me your answer then. All Might turned and walked away, his form disappearing into the urban landscape, leaving Izuku alone on the clean beach, with the weight of two worlds resting on his shoulders. The walk home was a blur. Izuku's feet moved on autopilot, while his mind raced at 1,000,000 miles per hour. One for all. A power that stockpiles power. The ultimate heroic quirk. The legacy of the symbol of peace. It was everything he had ever wanted. It was a complication he could have never predicted. He got home, mumbled a greeting to his mother, and locked himself in his room. He ignored the All Might posters on his wall, their smiling faces now feeling like portraits of a complex family member rather than simple idols. He pulled out his secret notebook, analysis for a new reality, and a pen, his hands shaking slightly. He needed to see it on paper. He needed to analyze it, the way he would a hero's quirk. He drew a line down the middle of a fresh page. One for all. Prose. An established, understood path to heroism. Publicly acceptable. Incredible physical power. Direct application for hero work, combat, rescue. The legacy. A direct connection to All Might and the lineage of heroes. A built-in support system and moral framework. A justifiable cover story. I could claim this was my latent quirk, finally manifesting. It would explain my newfound physical abilities. It is a power explicitly for good. Its very nature is to save, to protect. Cons: extreme physical toll. My body is stronger, but All Might's warnings suggest it could still tear me apart. Another secret to keep. The burden of this legacy is immense. It is not truly my power. I would be a vessel, a custodian. Is that enough? The unknown interaction. He underlined the last point 3 times. This was the terrifying, central variable in the entire equation. What would happen when a quirk designed to stockpile and contain immense energy was introduced into a body that was already a conduit for the fundamental force of chaos? He moved to the other side of the page. Chaos magic. Prose. Limitless potential. Wanda called it the grammar of reality. Its scope is theoretically infinite. Incredible versatility. Telekinesis, probability manipulation. Wanda has hinted at so much more: transmutation, illusion, energy projection. It is mine. Born from my own will. An extension of myself. Stealth. The most effective uses are subtle, untraceable. I can solve problems without throwing a single punch. Cons: no framework, no history in this world. I am completely alone in this. Completely unexplainable. If revealed, I would be seen as a freak, a monster. A villain? It defies all known science. Extreme danger. My own emotions are the trigger. A moment of lost control could be catastrophic. Ref. Westview Protocol. Its origin. Wanda was vague, mentioning a primordial, demonic entity. The source of this power is questionable, potentially malevolent. The unknown interaction. He stared at the page. 2 columns, 2 paths, 2 lifetimes. One was a well-lit, paved highway to the exact destination he'd always dreamed of. The other was a footpath into a dark, uncharted jungle, filled with unimaginable treasures and nightmarish beasts. And All Might was asking him to walk both at the same time. He felt a headache blooming behind his eyes. He couldn't solve this with logic alone. He needed a different perspective. He needed his teacher. He put the notebook away, sat on his bed, and closed his eyes. He let the frantic energy of his thoughts recede, sinking beneath the surface of his consciousness. He reached for the familiar, comforting hum of the static. The world dissolved, and he was in the nexus of wills. Wanda's silhouette was waiting for him, the red static around her calm and placid. She already knew. In this place of pure thought and will, there were no secrets. A river of legacy seeks to merge with an ocean of chaos. Her thought voice stated, not as a question, but as an observation. A fascinating development. I don't know what to do. Izuku projected, the carefully constructed walls of his analytical mind crumbling to reveal the terrified 15-year-old boy beneath. If I say no, I'm turning my back on All Might, on a guaranteed path to being a hero. I'd be a fool. But if I say yes, Wanda, what will happen? What will One for All do to me? To the magic? Wanda's form drifted closer, her presence a profound and empathetic calm in his storm of anxiety. I cannot give you the answer, Izuku. This choice must be yours, but I can offer you the truth as I understand it. The static around them swirled, forming two distinct images. On one side was a glowing, intricate chalice, exquisitely crafted, radiating a powerful, contained green-gold light. It was structured, ordered, beautiful. One for all. On the other side was a roiling, formless mass of scarlet energy, constantly shifting, an untamed sea of pure, primordial power. Chaos magic. One for all is a vessel, built and reinforced over generations to hold a specific kind of power. Wanda explained. Your body is also a vessel. All Might believes it is an empty one, ready to be filled. He is wrong. Her silhouette gestured to the roiling red mass. Your body is already full. It is a vessel overflowing with the raw, untamed power of creation. You have spent these last months learning not to fill it, but to keep it from spilling over. She brought the two images closer together. Now you propose to pour the contents of this chalice into this ocean. There are two possibilities: the image of the chalice tipped, and the green-gold light poured into the Scarlet Sea. In the first possibility, the two energies met and violently repelled each other. The vessel containing them, a vague, human-shaped outline, cracked and shattered into a million pieces. The energies will see each other as a contaminant, a paradox. Wanda's voice was grim. The structured, ordered power of One for All will war against the formless, untamed nature of chaos magic. They will tear your body and your mind apart in their battle for dominance. You will be annihilated, not just physically, but existentially. You will cease to be. Izuku's essence went cold. Cease to be. But there is another path. Wanda continued, and the vision reset. Again, the green-gold light poured into the Scarlet Sea. But this time, something different happened. The green-gold energy did not fight. Instead, it acted like a lattice, a crystalline structure plunging into a supersaturated solution. The chaotic red energy swirled around it, clinging to it, using its structure as a conduit. The red did not become green, and the green did not become red. They coexisted. The result was a new, singular energy, a core of stable, brilliant green gold, wreathed in a controlled, powerful corona of crackling scarlet. It was terrifyingly, beautifully powerful. In this possibility, Wanda said, her voice filled with a sense of awe, the energies find synergy. One for All, with its legacy of heroic will and its stockpiled power, does not become your weapon, it becomes your wand. It becomes the focusing lens, the anchor, the grammar book through which you can safely write the language of chaos. It would give your infinite, untamed power a finite, heroic shape. The raw energy of One for All could act as a battery, supercharging your spells to a degree I can scarcely imagine. But the risk is that you shatter. The images faded, leaving Izuku alone with Wanda in the void once more. I cannot tell you which outcome is more likely, she finished softly. It depends entirely on the strength of your will. On the vessel itself, Izuku was silent for a long time, contemplating the two visions. Annihilation, or transcendence. Utter failure, or a power greater than anyone in his world had ever conceived of. It was the ultimate gamble. You asked me, the first time we met, what I wanted more than anything. Izuku projected, his voice now steady, the fear replaced by a quiet, steely resolve. I told you I wanted to help people, to change things. I remember, Wanda replied. This whole time, I've been thinking of these as two separate paths. Izuku continued, a new clarity dawning in his mind. The path of the symbol of peace, or the path of the secret sorcerer. But you asked me a different question tonight. You showed me what happens when they merge. He focused on the vision of the synergistic energy, the green core and the red corona. One for All is a symbol. It's a promise. People see it, and they feel safe. Chaos magic, it's a scalpel. I can solve problems no one else can even see. I can rewrite the damage, heal the wounds, save people in ways a punch never could. He finally understood. It wasn't about choosing which power to use. It was about choosing who he wanted to be. Which path will allow you to save the most people? Wanda's voice echoed his thoughts, asking the question she had been leading him to all along. And can they coexist? They have to, Izuku stated, his will solidifying into a diamond-hard point of certainty. I'll make them coexist. I won't be just the next All Might. And I won't be a Scarlet Witch. I'll be something new. I will use the heart of One for All to anchor the chaos of my magic. The legacy will be my shield, and the magic will be my sword. A feeling of profound approval radiated from Wanda. A dangerous path. A noble one. Be careful, Izuku Midoriya. The universe will be watching. He woke with the sun on his face. He felt no fatigue, only a strange, serene clarity. He knew what he had to do. He met All Might at the beach. The hero looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept, his sunken eyes filled with a nervous, hopeful energy. Young Midoriya, he began, his voice tight with anticipation. Have you reached a decision? I have, Izuku said, bowing his head respectfully. All Might. Tashinori-san. It would be my honor to accept. I will inherit One for All and do my utmost to live up to the legacy you have entrusted to me. The relief that washed over the hero was a physical thing. He seemed to grow 2 inches, and his signature smile returned, genuine and blindingly bright. Excellent! I knew you would make the right choice, my boy. Your journey starts now. But Izuku held up a hand, his expression serious. On one condition. All Might paused, his smile faltering slightly. A condition? My other ability, Izuku said carefully. You said you don't understand it. That's true. To be honest, I barely understand it myself. It is powerful, but it is also volatile. I believe One for All can help me control it. I believe they can work together. But I need your trust. I will forge my own path. I will not just be a copy of you. I will be a different kind of hero. I have to be. All Might looked at him, truly looked at him. He saw the boyish face, but behind it, he saw the steely resolve, the analytical mind, and the profound weight of a secret the hero couldn't begin to fathom. He saw not a fanboy, but a partner. I trust you, young Midoriya, he said, his voice soft again. Forge whatever path you must. As long as it is one that saves people with a smile, I will support you. He then plucked a hair from his head. Now eat this. Izuku stared at the single strand of blonde hair, his grand, philosophical resolution crashing into a bizarre, comedic wall. Ha! After a sputtering, slightly undignified explanation from All Might, Izuku took the hair. He looked at it, lying in his palm. The key to a heroic legacy. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and swallowed it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then it began. It wasn't a feeling of power welling up. It was a detonation. A torrent of brilliant, emerald green energy flooded his system, 1,000 thunderstorms condensed into a single point. It was the roar of 8 generations of will, a chorus of voices screaming a single, unified purpose. Save them. It was warm, and bright, and overwhelmingly powerful. But it was not alone. From the depths of his being, the Scarlet Ocean rose to meet the Green River. The red static of chaos magic, which had always been a quiet hum beneath his skin, surged forth, recognizing the intruder. It was a force of pure, untamed potential, a silent scream of I am. The two forces met in the center of his soul. Izuku's vision went white with green lightning and red static. A silent war, a violent symphony, erupted within him. The ordered, structured power of One for All tried to contain and quantify him, to pour him into its heroic mold. The formless, infinite power of chaos magic tried to dissolve and rewrite the foreign energy, to make it part of its own chaotic whole. He felt a tearing sensation, a feeling of being ripped apart on a metaphysical level. This was it. The first possibility. Annihilation. No. His will, the core of his very being, the one thing that was truly his, asserted itself. He was not a vessel to be filled. He was not a conduit to be overwhelmed. He was Izuku Midoriya. They have to coexist. He screamed into the internal hurricane. I'll make them coexist. He grabbed the two warring concepts with his mind. He took the structured legacy of OFA and used it as a shield, an anchor against the terrifying pull of chaos. He took the boundless energy of his magic and wrapped it around the core of OFA, not to smother it, but to fuel it. He wasn't choosing one over the other. He was choosing both. He was forging his own path, just as he'd promised. Slowly, agonizingly, the internal storm began to subside. The war became a tense, uneasy truce. He could feel them both inside him now, two immense, powerful beasts circling each other in the cage of his body. The bright, heroic green of One for All, and the deep, secret scarlet of chaos magic. Separate, yet intertwined. A fated, impossible intersection. He opened his eyes, gasping, and fell to his knees on the sand. Green lightning crackled faintly over his arms, and for a split second, his irises glowed with a burning red light. "My boy, are you all right?" All Might asked, rushing to his side, his face etched with worry. Izuku looked up at him, a shaky, triumphant smile on his face. His body ached. His mind felt raw. But he was whole. He had survived. "I'm fine," he breathed, his voice filled with a new, terrifying, and wonderful power. "I'm just getting started." The air in the UA High Auditorium vibrated with the collective anxiety of 1,000 teenage dreams. It was a tangible thing, a low hum of nervous energy, whispered hopes, and the rustling of exam pamphlets. Izuku Midoriya sat in the midst of it, a small, still point in a sea of restless energy. On the surface, he looked like any other examinee, hunched slightly, hands clasped tightly in his lap, his eyes wide as he stared at the brightly lit stage. But beneath the surface, a quiet storm was raging. Two oceans of power churned within him. One was a brilliant, emerald sea of borrowed light and legacy. One for all. It felt like a sleeping giant in his bones, a nuclear reactor at 0-point energy, promising limitless power at the cost of self-immolation. He had spent the last few weeks since receiving it in a state of constant, low-grade terror and awe. Simply trying to draw out a fraction of its power made his limbs feel like overpressurized soda cans, ready to explode. All Might's training regimen had been relentless, but 10 months of physical conditioning was a K-Puck mattress trying to stop a bullet train when it came to containing this quirk. To use it in the exam, to punch a robot with the full, untamed force of One for All, would be to turn his arm into a cloud of red mist. That path was closed to him. The other ocean was a deeper, darker, and infinitely more familiar sea. Chaos magic. It was a secret, scarlet abyss within his soul, a power that whispered the universe's source code into his ear. Wanda's lessons had been his constant companion, her warnings a litany he repeated to himself every night. "Subtlety is your greatest weapon," her thought voice had echoed in the Nexus. "They are expecting a shout. Give them a whisper they cannot trace. Do not show them the language. Show them only the results of the translation." A grand, reality-bending display was just as suicidal as using One for All. It would paint a target on his back so large it could be seen from another dimension. He would be labeled a monster, a villain, or an anomaly to be dissected in a lab. That path was also closed, so he had forged a third option. A new strategy, born from the terrified, analytical mind that was his truest asset. He would not be a sledgehammer. He would be a surgeon. He would use chaos magic not to rewrite reality, but to gently edit it. Finesse over force. Precision over power. He would pass this test on his own terms, using a power that was truly his, while the heroic legacy of One for All remained a dormant promise, an ace he could not yet play. "Welcome to today's live performance," a voice boomed, shaking Izuku from his reverie. The hero present Mike stood on stage, a tidal wave of enthusiasm in a leather jacket. "Everybody say hey." Silence. Izuku felt a pang of second-hand embarrassment for the hero. As President Mike launched into his high-energy explanation of the practical exam, Izuku's mind was already at work, cross-referencing the information with his own unique skill set. 3 types of villain bots, 1-pointers, 2-pointers, 3-pointers. The goal was to immobilize them. Most of the examinees around him were probably visualizing how they would punch, blast, or smash their way to a high score. Izuku was visualizing schematics. He saw the robots not as enemies, but as complex systems with exploitable flaws. Their joints, their power sources, their targeting sensors, they were all just threads in the tapestry he could now perceive. "And finally, there's the 4th type of villain!" President Mike roared, a colossal silhouette appearing on the screen behind him. "The 0-pointer! This guy is a gimmick, an obstacle to be avoided. Think of him like a thwomp from Super Mario. I recommend you run." A nervous ripple went through the crowd. Most saw it as a simple instruction: avoid the big one. Izuku saw it as a crucial variable. An arena-sized obstacle meant collateral damage. It meant a high probability of trapped or injured examinees. It meant a chance for something other than just destruction. It was a chance for rescue. A tall, broad-shouldered young man with glasses stood up, his hand chopping the air with rigid precision. He admonished Present Mike for the pamphlet's typo and then turned his severe gaze directly on Izuku. "And you, with the curly hair," he declared, his voice ringing with authority. "You have been muttering this entire time. It is distracting. If you think this is some kind of game, then I suggest you leave," Izuku squeaked, clamping his hands over his mouth, his face flushing crimson. He hadn't even realized he'd been verbalizing his thoughts. He'd been running simulations in his head, probability hex on the main actuator of a three-pointer, followed by a telekinetic shear of the hydraulic lines. Minimal energy cost, maximum efficiency. And the words had leaked out. He sank low in his seat, wishing he could use his magic to convince reality that he had never been there at all. The bus ride to the testing ground was a tense, silent affair. Izuku found himself at the same site as the severe boy with glasses and a kind-faced girl with a brown bob. He tried to wish her luck, but his nerves got the better of him, and he was once again scolded by the glasses boy for trying to distract the competition. He stood before the towering gates of the mock city, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The other examinees were stretching, showing off their quirks. A boy with engines in his calves revved them impatiently. A girl with pink skin exuded an aura of cheerful confidence. Izuku just stood there, his hands in his pockets, feeling the two oceans of power swirling inside him. He took a deep breath. Calm. Precision. Control. And start! Present Mick's voice screamed from unseen speakers. The crowd of teenagers stood in confused silence. "What's wrong? The tests ain't going. There are no countdowns in a real fight. Run! Run!" The gates flew open, and the mob surged forward. Izuku was momentarily frozen, caught off guard. But then, 10 months of relentless training took over. He leaned forward and sprinted into the concrete canyon, his newly hardened muscles propelling him past the initial choke point. He rounded a corner, and came face to face with his first opponent. A one-pointer. It was a squat, green machine on a single tread, its single red eye glowing menacingly. It swiveled to face him, its machine guns whining as they powered up. The old Izuku would have panicked. The one for all Izuku would have, suicidally, tried to punch it. The new Izuku stood his ground. He closed his eyes for a split second, and the world behind his eyelids resolved into a shimmering web of faint red lines. He saw the robot, and he saw the threads of probability connected to it. The dominant thread was it firing its weapon. But there were other, weaker threads. A thread where its tread jammed. A thread where its targeting system glitched. And a tiny, almost invisible thread representing the probability of a catastrophic internal power failure. It was a 1 in a million chance. A gentle touch can fell a mountain if applied to the right pebble. Izuku's eyes snapped open. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't chant any words. He just focused his will, a laser beam of pure intent, on that 1 in a million thread. He reached out with his mind and tugged. For a bystander, nothing happened. There was no flash of light, no sound. But the robot, its guns halfway through their charging sequence, suddenly shuddered. A flicker of sparks erupted from a seam in its neck. Its red eye dimmed, flickered once, and went dark. With a pathetic hydraulic sigh, it slumped forward, completely inert. 1 point. Izuku let out a shaky breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It worked. No one could have seen what he did. To any observer, the robot had simply malfunctioned at a very convenient time. A triumphant grin flashed across his face. This was his style. This was his path. He delved deeper into the city, becoming a ghost in the machine. He was no longer a participant in a brawl. He was a hacker, exploiting the flaws in the system. He saw a 2-pointer bearing down on a boy who could shoot lasers from his navel. As the boy's attack glanced harmlessly off its armor, Izuku focused on the robot's leg joint. He didn't try to lift the whole machine. He focused solely on the dozen bolts holding the joint's protective plating in place. "Your place is not here," With a series of sharp, metallic pings, the bolts shot out of their housing as if fired from a gun. The armor plate clattered to the ground, exposing a mess of whirring gears and delicate hydraulics. The naval laser boy, seeing his chance, fired again, and the robot's leg crumpled, sending it crashing to the ground. Izuku was already gone, melting back into the chaos. He became an artist of subtle destruction. A three-pointer's missile pod door was about to open. Izuku applied a hex to its hinges, causing them to rust and seize shut in a fraction of a second. The missiles, unable to launch, detonated inside the robot's torso, blowing it apart from within. He saw another robot aiming at a girl with vines for hair. He telekinetically ripped a stop sign from its post and flung it like a discus, embedding it in the robot's optical sensor. He was a whirlwind of precision. He didn't need to get close. He didn't need to touch anything. He was a phantom, racking up an impressive tally of villain points without throwing a single punch. But villain points were only half the equation. He saw a pile of rubble, dislodged by another examinee's explosive quirk, begin to slide from the roof of a 3-story building. Below it, a short, purple-haired boy was cowering, too terrified to move. There was no time for subtlety. Izuku thrust his hand forward. A shimmering, translucent pane of ruby-red energy, about the size of a door, materialized in the air above the boy. The concrete and rebar crashed against it with a deafening boom. The shield buckled, spiderweb cracks of pure energy spreading across its surface, but it held. Once the cascade of debris had stopped, the shield dissolved into a shower of harmless red motes. The purple-haired boy looked up, his eyes wide with baffled gratitude, but Izuku was already rounding the corner. One rescue point. A big one. He saw another student, a girl with large, webbed hands, trip and fall directly in the path of a charging 2-pointer. Izuku didn't have time to disable the machine. Instead, he focused on the girl, and with a gentle but firm telekinetic push, slid her across the pavement, out of the robot's path. To her, it felt like she had slipped on a patch of oil. She scrambled to her feet, unharmed, as the robot thundered past. Another rescue point. In a darkened observation room, screens flickered, displaying hundreds of camera feeds from the various testing sites. A group of pro-heroes, the faculty of UA, watched with critical eyes. "That Todoroki kid is a powerhouse," Snipe commented, watching the son of Endeavor freeze half a city block in an instant. "And the Bakugo kid, all firepower, no finesse, but you can't argue with his results." Aizawa's tired, bloodshot eyes were scanning a different set of monitors. "Nizu," he said, his voice a low monotone. "Pull up the file for examinee 7111. Midoriya Izuku." The rat-like principal, Nizu, chirped happily, his paws flying across a keyboard. Izuku's face and file appeared on the main screen. "Ah, yes! The young man who cleared Dagoba Beach. What about him?" "His quirk is listed as quirkless," Aizawa stated, his gaze not leaving the screen where Izuku was subtly disabling another robot. "That is obviously a clerical error. But I can identify what his power is. He's displayed localized material failure, minor telekinesis, projectile generation, and some kind of energy barrier. They're all low-level manifestations. No single, unifying power." "It's illogical, is it?" Nizu asked, a gleam in his intelligent black eyes. He zoomed in on a feed showing Izuku from a different angle. "Or are we simply failing to see the pattern? Watch him. He isn't fighting, he's dismantling. He's not overpowering the robots, he's outthinking them. He's exploiting weaknesses that shouldn't be exploitable. He's not using a dozen weak quirks, Aizawa-kun. He's using one, exceptionally versatile quirk with a level of control and intelligence I have rarely seen in a first-year applicant." Nizu brought up the scoreboard. Midoriya's villain point count was high, easily in the top 10. But it was the other number that made Aizawa raise an eyebrow. "And look at that," Nizu chirped, pointing a small paw at the screen. "An unprecedented number of rescue points. While the other children are focused on destruction, he has been actively and effectively protecting them, often without them even realizing it. He values preservation over annihilation. Now that is interesting." Aizawa stared at the screen, his logical mind turning the problem over and over. A power that defied easy classification, Wielded with ruthless efficiency and a quiet, heroic compassion, Midoriya Izuku was an anomaly. A puzzle. And Shota Aizawa hated puzzles he couldn't solve. A deep, earth-shaking tremor rocked the entire city. Izuku stumbled, catching himself against the wall of a building. Down the main thoroughfare, a shadow fell, a moving eclipse that blotted out the sun. The zero-pointer had been released. It was a monster of chrome and steel, a skyscraper given malevolent life. Its every step was a minor earthquake. The other examinees, their bravado evaporating in an instant, did the sensible thing. They turned and ran, screaming. Izuku began to back away as well. His job here was done. He had enough villain points, and likely a good number of rescue points. There was no logic in confronting an obstacle designed to be unbeatable. "Ow!" a girl's cry. Small, and full of pain, Izuku's head snapped toward the sound. His blood ran cold. It was the kind-faced girl with the brown bob from the entrance. She was on the ground, a large slab of concrete pinning her leg, directly in the path of the colossal robot's advance. Time seemed to slow down. The screams of the fleeing students faded into a dull roar. All he could see was her, trapped and helpless. All he could feel was the thudding, rhythmic impact of the zero-pointer's footsteps, a countdown to oblivion. The sleeping giant in his bones awoke. "Save her!" A chorus of 8 voices screamed in his soul. One for all surged, a torrent of green lightning threatening to erupt from his skin. He could do it. One titanic leap. One cataclysmic punch. He could destroy that thing. He could be like All Might. "And you will shatter," a calm, sad voice whispered in his mind. Wanda's voice. "Power without control is just a tantrum. A gentle touch can fell a mountain if applied to the right pebble." He looked at the approaching metal mountain. He looked at the concrete ground beneath it. The pebble. His choice was made. He stopped backpedaling and turned to face the advancing giant. The fear was still there, a cold, hard knot in his stomach, but his desperation was now a focusing lens. He planted his feet, digging his sneakers into the asphalt, and raised his hands. "What is that idiot doing?" someone shouted from the retreating crowd. Izuku ignored them. He ignored everything but the task. He poured his will, his focus, his entire being, into the ground beneath the zero-pointer. The subtle, almost invisible red shimmer he had been using all day erupted from him in a visible, crackling wave. A corona of furious scarlet energy enveloped his body, kicking up dust and pebbles around him. The air grew heavy, tasting of ozone and static electricity. He wasn't trying to break the concrete. He was trying to convince it. He was reaching into the fundamental grammar of its existence, the code that defined it as solid, stable, hard. And he was introducing a new, contradictory line of code. You are not solid. You are not stable. You are liquid. You are mud. He was unwriting its nature. The asphalt under the zero-pointer's massive, building-sized foot began to bubble and warp. It lost its hard, black texture, turning a sickly, churning gray. The concrete liquefied. The zero-pointer took its next step, expecting to find solid ground. Instead, its multi-ton foot sank deep into the now viscous earth, throwing it completely off balance. A surprised, electronic wail screeched from its speakers. It flailed its huge arms, its own immense weight becoming its undoing. With a final, desperate exertion of will, Izuku pushed. He guided its fall, ensuring the metal titan would topple away from the trapped girl. With a cataclysmic, deafening boom that shook the entire city block, the zero-pointer crashed down, its head plowing through a row of empty buildings, far away from Uraraka. Silence descended, broken only by the settling of dust and the distant whine of damaged machinery. The immediate threat was gone, but his work wasn't finished. Izuku, his body trembling from the massive expenditure of energy, sprinted towards the girl. The concrete slab on her leg was too heavy to lift with his own strength. He knelt beside her, his hands hovering over the slab. The red aura, now more controlled and precise, flared around his fingers. "It's going to be okay," he said, his voice strained. He focused, and with a deep grunt of effort, the slab of concrete lifted a few inches into the air, held aloft by his telekinetic will. Uraraka, wincing in pain but with awe in her eyes, scrambled free. The moment she was clear, Izuku released his hold. The slab crashed back to the ground. He then gently placed a hand on her back, and a soft, red energy field enveloped her. He lifted her effortlessly, cradling her in the air, and moved her a safe distance away from the rubble. Biboyoyoz! A klaxon horn blared across the city. And that's time! Present Mick's voice announced. The tension in the air vanished, replaced by a wave of collective exhaustion. Izuku's own strength gave out. The red aura around him faded. The two oceans of power within him receded, leaving behind a profound, soul-deep fatigue. He dropped to his knees, panting, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. He hadn't broken a single bone, but he felt as if he had run a marathon with his soul. From across the testing ground, Katsuki Bakugo stood amidst a field of smoking, dismembered robots. He had seen it. He had seen the useless, quirkless Deku stand his ground against the zero-pointer. He had seen the impossible red glow. He had seen the ground itself seem to melt. There had been no punch. No explosion. No physical exertion he could understand. It was just wrong. It didn't fit any category of quirk he knew. It was quiet, and strange, and terrifyingly effective. The Deku he had known his entire life was a pebble. This was something else, and the confusion, the burning, indignant rage of not understanding, was more infuriating than any challenge to his strength had ever been. Izuku looked at his trembling hands, then at the fallen giant he had toppled, and finally at the girl he had saved, who was now being tended to by arriving paramedics. He had passed the test, not All Might's test, or Yue's test. His own test. He had faced an impossible challenge, and he had won not with borrowed power, but with controlled chaos. He had redefined what it meant to be a hero in this arena. And as Recovery Girl arrived and planted a gentle kiss on his forehead, mending his exhaustion, he felt the quiet, dormant hum of both One for All and Chaos magic settle within him, a fragile but successful synthesis. He was in. The letter from Yue arrived on a Tuesday. It was a simple, unassuming cream-colored envelope, but it felt as heavy as a neutron star in Izuku's trembling hands. For a week, he had been a ghost in his own home, haunted by the specter of his performance. Had he done enough? Had his subtle, reality-warping tactics even registered on the score sheet? Or had they seen him as a cheater, a boy with an unexplainable power who broke the rules of the game? He sat at his desk, the All Might figurine on his monitor seeming to watch him with a plastic, unblinking smile. His mother hovered by the door, wringing her hands, her anxiety a palpable cloud in the room. With a deep breath that did little to calm the frantic hummingbird in his chest, he tore open the seal. A small metal disc clattered onto his desk. A hologram flickered to life, bathing the room in a pale blue light. All Might, in his full, heroic glory, stood before him. "I am here." "Yes, a projection," the hero boomed. Izuku nearly fell out of his chair. All Might went on to explain that he would be a teacher at Yue, a piece of news that would have sent the old Izuku into a paroxysm of fanboy ecstasy. Now, it was just another terrifying variable in an increasingly complex equation. The hero praised his work ethic, his courage, and then, the moment of truth arrived. "In the practical exam, brute force alone is not what makes a hero," All Might declared, his voice softening slightly. "A hero must also know how to save people. And that is why we have a secret point system." He gestured to a screen that appeared beside him, displaying a leaderboard. "Your actions, young Midoriya, in protecting your fellow examinees, earned you a staggering 60 rescue points, the highest score in that category in the history of this exam." Izuku's eyes widened, tears welling up instantly. 60 points. Combined with your 45 villain points, you have a total of 105 points. All Might's smile seemed to fill the room. "You passed with flying colors, finishing in first place." The dam of a week's worth of tension broke. Izuku sobbed, fat, hiccuping tears of pure, unadulterated relief, burying his face in his arms. His mother cried with him, her own quiet sobs a testament to her unwavering, often terrified, faith in her son. "So come, young Midoriya." All Might's projection concluded, his voice resonating with pride. "This is your Hero Academia, first place." He had beaten Bakugo. He had beaten the son of Endeavor. He had done it without breaking a single bone, without revealing the true, cosmic nature of his power. He had done it his way. The feeling was intoxicating, a dizzying cocktail of triumph and terror. He had proven his strategy worked. But he had also painted an even bigger target on his back. He wasn't just an examinee anymore, he was the #1 student. And everyone would be watching. The first day at UA felt like stepping into a dream. The building was immense, a monument of glass and steel dedicated to the crafting of hope. The students in Class 1A were a vibrant, intimidating collection of powerhouse quirks and personalities. He recognized the kind-faced girl, Uraraka Achiko, and the severe boy with glasses, Ida Tenya, who surprised him with a formal, heartfelt apology for his behavior at the exam. And then there was Bakugo, whose explosive glare could have melted steel, his fury at seeing Izuku in this classroom a palpable force of nature. Their homeroom teacher was a man who looked like he had just crawled out of a sleeping bag and hadn't slept in a week. Shota Aizawa, the erasure hero, Eraserhead. Izuku's inner fanboy made a mental note of his quirk's limitations regarding mutant types and line-of-sight requirements. Aizawa wasted no time on pleasantries, herding them out to a training field for a quirk apprehension test. "You've been taking standardized tests your whole lives," Aizawa said, his voice a tired drone. "But you've never been allowed to use your quirks. It's not rational. Today, you show me what you can do." He tossed a softball to Bakugo. "What was your farthest throw in middle school?" 67 meters. Bakugo grunted. "Try it with your quirk." Bakugo grinned, a feral, shark-like expression. He wound up, and with a titanic, roaring explosion that sent a shockwave across the field, launched the ball into the stratosphere. "Die!" he screamed, as was his custom. Aizawa's device beeped. 705.2 meters. The class erupted in excited chatter. This was going to be fun. This was what being at UA was all about. "Fun, you say?" Aizawa's voice dropped, and the temperature of the field seemed to drop with it. His eyes glowed with a faint red light, his black hair floating around his head as if underwater. The playful atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a cold, professional dread. "You have 3 years to become heroes. You don't have time for fun. Whoever comes in last place in this test will be judged to have no potential, and will be expelled immediately." Panic seized the class. Expelled? On the first day? Izuku's mind, however, immediately shifted from panic to analysis. It was a logical deception. A rational ruse to push them to their absolute limits. But the threat felt real enough. He looked at the list of tests: 50-meter dash, grip strength, standing long jump, repeated side steps, ball throw. Each one was a new minefield he had to navigate. How much could he show? What could he afford to reveal? The 50-meter dash was first. Ida Tenya, with his engine-powered legs, finished in a blazing 3.04 seconds. Izuku stepped up to the line, his heart pounding. He couldn't use one for all speed. He couldn't afford to be seen floating. He needed something subtle. He looked down the track. He saw the air itself, not as empty space, but as a medium, a substance with properties he could manipulate. As the starting pistol fired, he didn't just run. He reached out with his will and gently, subtly, thinned the air resistance in a narrow cone directly in front of him. It wasn't a gale force wind at his back. It was more like he was running in a near vacuum. To an outside observer, he was just surprisingly fast. His legs, toned and powerful from 10 months of physical labor, pumped furiously. He crossed the line in 5.58 seconds, a respectable, but not superhuman time. It was enough to avoid the bottom, but not enough to draw suspicion. The grip strength test came next. A large, muscular student with multiple arms recorded a score of 540 kilograms. Izuku took the device. His physical grip was strong, far stronger than it used to be, but not nearly enough to compete. He wrapped his hand around the grip, and as he squeezed, he wrapped an invisible, telekinetic field around the device as well. He wasn't just squeezing with his muscles, he was squeezing with his mind. The red light of the digital display climbed rapidly. He stopped it at 110 kilograms. Again, impressive for his build, but not impossibly so. Believable. He continued this pattern through the other tests. For the standing long jump, He gave himself a gentle, unseen telekinetic nudge at the apex of his jump, allowing him to clear the sandbox entirely. For the repeated side steps, he used minor probability hexes on himself, ensuring his footing was always perfect, his rhythm never broken. He was a ghost, a magician performing subtle close-up tricks in a room full of people setting off fireworks. He was flying under the radar, carefully curating a perception of a low to mid-tier, versatile enhancement quirk. He was surviving, but he knew the main event was yet to come. The ball throw. He watched his classmates. Uraraka touched her ball and sent it flying into the sky, the device registering an infinity symbol. The class gasped. Aoyama shot it forward with his naval laser. Everyone was using grand, explosive, visible powers, and then it was his turn. He walked into the circle, the soft ball feeling heavy and mundane in his palm. All eyes were on him. He was the kid who had placed first in the exam, the one who had taken down the zero-pointer. They were expecting a show. Bakugo's crimson eyes were narrowed into slits, boring into him, hungry for an explanation, for a power he could understand and therefore dominate. Aizawa's gaze was the most intense of all. It was a cold, analytical stare, the look of a scientist observing a perplexing specimen. This was the test that would define him in his teacher's eyes. He could throw it with one for all. Even a fraction of a percent would shatter his finger, but it would produce a spectacular result. It would be a simple, understandable display of super strength. It would be the easy way, but it wouldn't be his. He looked at Aizawa. He looked at the ball. And he made his choice. He took a deep breath, centering himself. He wasn't just going to throw the ball. He was going to send it on a journey. He reached out with his mind, not to the space around the ball, but to a concept, a destination. He pictured a spot high in the stratosphere, miles above the school, a place of thin air and frozen silence. He wasn't going to build a bridge of force to get the ball there. He was going to create a door. He channeled his will, and the familiar, crackling red energy of chaos magic swirled into existence, for the first time in front of his entire class. It was no longer a subtle, invisible force. It was a visible, undeniable manifestation of his power. A corona of scarlet static enveloped his hand and the softball, the air humming with a low, vibrational thrum. He drew his arm back, not to throw, but to aim. And as he swung his arm forward, he didn't release the ball. He released the spell. He spoke a single word, one of the few Wanda had taught him, a word from a language not meant for human tongues. It sounded like a cross between a whisper and a static discharge. Vanish. The ball did not fly. It did not shoot forward. One moment, it was in his hand, wreathed in red energy. The next, it was simply gone. It didn't even make a sound as it disappeared, leaving behind only a faint, lingering scent of ozone and a dissipating cloud of red motes. The class stared in stunned silence. Bakugo's jaw was slack. Ida's glasses had slipped down his nose. Uraraka's eyes were wide saucers. Aizawa stared at the spot where the ball had been, then down at his device. The numbers on the screen were spinning wildly, unable to calculate a velocity or a trajectory. After a moment, it gave up and displayed two symbols. A single, elegant, sideways 8, infinity, the same as Uraraka's. But hers had traveled. His had ceased to exist and then, what? Re-existed somewhere else? What the hell was that? Someone whispered. Did he teleport it? Another asked. Midoriya. Aizawa's voice was dangerously quiet. What was that? Before Izuka could answer, a cold, prickling sensation washed over him. It wasn't a physical cold. It was a feeling of emptiness. A sudden, jarring void where the constant, comforting hum of his magic had been. He felt hollow. Muted. He looked up at his teacher. Aizawa's eyes were blazing red, his hair floating, his capture weapon writhing like snakes around his neck. Erasure. He had activated his quirk. I asked you a question? Aizawa repeated, his voice laced with a predatory threat. Explain your quirk. Now, Izuka looked down at his own hands. The red energy was gone, yes, but the connection was still there. The emptiness was just on the surface. He could still feel the deep, scarlet ocean churning within him, untouched. He was a radio, and Aizawa had turned off the speaker, but the broadcast signal was still coming through loud and clear. He could feel the hum of the nexus, the echo of Wanda's voice. Aizawa's power was a firewall designed to block biological code. But his power wasn't written in that language. Aizawa's erasure didn't work on him. This was a development Izuku hadn't anticipated. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. He had a power that the ultimate power canceller couldn't cancel. He looked up, meeting his teacher's glowing red eyes, and spoke the truth, a truth that would shatter every preconception Aizawa had. "It's not working, sir." The floating hair and capture weapon didn't so much as twitch. But Aizawa's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine, unadulterated shock breaking through his stoic facade. In all his years as a hero, in all his thousands of fights, his power had never failed on an emitter-type quirk. Never. It had limitations. It couldn't erase heteromorphic quirks, it required line of sight, but when it was active, when it was locked on, it worked. Full stop. "What did you say?" Aizawa growled, the word a low threat. "Your quirk, sir," Izuku said, trying to keep his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "It's not erasing mine. I can still feel it." Aizawa's glare intensified, as if he was trying to burn the power out of Izuku through sheer force of will. But nothing happened. Izuku was still just a boy, standing in a circle, connected to a force his teacher could not comprehend. This wasn't a quirk. Not in any way Aizawa understood. This was something other. The teacher's eyes stopped glowing. His hair fell back around his face. The pressure on the class lifted. He strode forward, his footsteps silent and menacing on the dirt field, until he was standing directly in front of Izuku, his capture weapon now held loosely in his hand. He was close enough that Izuku could see the exhaustion etched into the lines on his face, and the burning, dangerous curiosity in his dark eyes. "Every quirk has a biological component," Aizawa stated, his voice a low, dangerous murmur for Izuku's ears only. "A quirk factor. My power erases the expression of that factor. If it is not working on you, then there are only two possibilities. 1. You have a mutant-type quirk with a subtle physical manifestation I cannot see, which is highly unlikely given what you just did. Or 2. He leaned in closer. What you are using is not a quirk." Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. He had been caught. Exposed on the very first day. The lie he had prepared, the half-truth he had constructed, felt flimsy and pathetic now. But it was all he had. Wanda's voice echoed from a lesson in the Nexus. "Give them a box to put you in, even if the box is a lie. People are more afraid of what they cannot categorize than what they can. I have a name for it." Izuku stammered, his mind racing. He had practiced this. He had written it in his notebook, a vague, pseudoscientific explanation that sounded plausible enough to deflect further questions. "I call it causality. My quirk lets me manipulate the relationship between cause and effect on a small scale." Aizawa's eyebrow twitched, a minuscule movement that conveyed a universe of skepticism. "Explain." "The robots at the exam," Izuku said, his voice gaining a sliver of confidence as he recited his prepared script. "I didn't break them. I just introduced an effect, internal system failure, without a direct cause. The ball throw. I redefined its cause of location from my hand to a point several miles away. The effect was its instantaneous movement." He looked up at Aizawa. "When you use your quirk on me, you are trying to erase the cause, my quirk factor. But my power isn't about the cause, it's about the effect. So it doesn't work. Or, that's my theory anyway." It was a brilliant lie. It was complex, academic, and fundamentally untestable. It was exactly the kind of overthought, analytical nonsense a boy like him would invent. Aizawa stared at him for a long, silent moment. He was a human lie detector, and every one of his senses was screaming that Midoriya was hiding something monumental. The explanation was clever, almost too clever. It was a perfectly constructed box, designed to be so confusing that no one would bother trying to open it. But he didn't call him out on it. To do so, to accuse a student of lying about the fundamental nature of his power on the first day, would be irrational. He had no proof, only a deep, gut-level certainty that he was looking at something that did not belong in his meticulously ordered world. Causality. Aizawa repeated the word, tasting it. It sounded like a fantasy. He grunted, a non-committal sound, and turned away from Izuku. Finish the rest of the tests, and we will be having a long talk about this later, Midoriya. The unspoken threat hung in the air. As Izuku walked back to his classmates, he could feel their stares. They were a mixture of awe, confusion, and fear. He had wanted to fly under the radar, but with a single, impossible act, he had put himself at the very center of it. The rest of the test was a blur. Izuku performed at the same carefully calibrated, believable level as before, but the damage was done. The quiet mystery he had cultivated had been shattered, replaced by a loud, glaring question mark. He finished the overall test in the middle of the pack, his stellar ball throw balanced by his otherwise average results. As Aizawa displayed the final rankings, he revealed his threat of expulsion was, as Izuku had suspected, a lie. A logical deception. But as the class began to head back inside, Aizawa's voice cut through the chatter. Midoriya! Stay behind. The other students filed past, some shooting him curious glances, others avoiding his gaze entirely. Soon, it was just the two of them on the silent training field. Your file says you were diagnosed as quirkless at age 4. Aizawa began, not turning to look at him. It notes the extra joint in your pinky toe. Medically, you should not have a quirk. It was a late manifestation, Izuku said, falling back on the cover story he and All Might had agreed upon. It appeared the morning of the entrance exam. A power like causality, with the level of control you displayed, manifested overnight? Aizawa's tone was flat, utterly unconvinced. Impossible. That level of finesse takes years of practice, unless you've been lying about being quirkless your entire life. I haven't! Izuku protested, the truth of that statement making his voice sharp. Aizawa finally turned to face him. His expression was no longer threatening, but weary. Infinitely weary. I don't care about your past, Midoriya. I care about my classroom. I am responsible for 30 lives in there, and I cannot have an unknown, unstable variable in my charge. Your power, whatever it truly is an anomaly. It doesn't follow the rules, and powers that don't follow the rules are, without exception, dangerous. He took a step closer, his gaze pinning Izuku to the spot. I am not going to expel you. Niza would have my head, and frankly, you are far too interesting to throw away. But I am putting you on notice. I will be watching your every move. Every time you use your power, I will be analyzing it. I will pick it apart until I understand how it works, and if I ever, for a single second, believe that you are a danger to my other students, I will have you removed from my class and this school without hesitation. Am I understood? Yes, sir, Izuku whispered, his throat dry. Good, Aizawa grunted. Now get to class. And try not to deconstruct reality before lunch. As Izuku walked back to the main building, his legs feeling like lead, he knew that his life at UA was going to be even more complicated than he had imagined. He had an impossibly powerful quirk to master, a cosmic secret to protect, a terrifyingly perceptive teacher watching his every move, and a childhood rival who now saw him as an incomprehensible threat. He had passed the test. He had avoided expulsion. But he had traded a quiet, anonymous existence for a life under the microscope, and he had a sinking feeling that the quirk apprehension test was the easiest exam he would face all year. The real test had just begun.